The cold Kansas City night hums with music, neon, and fear. It's the late 1970s, and the River Quay entertainment district glows like a promise. Jazz spilling from doorways, young couples laughing over cocktails, a heartbeat of rebirth in a city long ruled by shadows. Then, at 1:27 a.m., the promise explodes. A fireball tears through the quiet streets, shaking windows for blocks. Metal rains from the sky. A car, once idling in front of a nightclub, is now twisted wreckage. The blast lights up the brick walls of the River Quay like a war zone. When firefighters arrive, they find more than destruction. They find a message. This isn't random, this is a declaration. Behind the chaos, behind the smoke and screams lies a war, one not fought between cops and gangsters, but among the gangsters themselves. The Kansas City outfit, once unified under the old world leadership of Civella, has turned inward. Brothers against brothers, friends against friends, all fighting for control of this small patch of nightlife gold. The newspapers will call it the River Quay War. But to the men who lived it, it's personal, it's betrayal, greed and revenge disguised as business. And it will leave bodies in alleys, clubs in ashes, and one of America's most powerful Midwestern mobs in ruin. What began as a dream to rebuild a city becomes a stage for murder. And when the FBI starts listening in, on phones, in bars, and whispered conversations, they realize the mob war in Kansas City isn't just about River Quay. It's about Vegas. It's about money. It's about control. And soon, the car bombs won't just shake the city. They'll shake the entire American mafia. Chapter 1. The City Built on Deals. Before Kansas City became a battlefield, it was a kingdom built on quiet deals and handshakes. Long before car bombs and wiretaps, power here moved in whispers, through smoky back rooms, courthouse corridors, and dimly lit bars where the law bent easily to the right offer. The story begins in the 1920s. Prohibition has turned the Midwest into a bootlegger's paradise. Trucks move through Kansas City under cover of darkness, loaded with whiskey from Canada and the East Coast. The police see it all and look the other way. Because the mob isn't just tolerated here. It's part of the system. At the heart of it all stands Johnny Lazia. Sharp suits, slick hair, and a smile that means business. Lazia isn't just another gangster, he's a political force. The right-hand man to Tom Pendergast, the powerful Democratic boss who controls Kansas City like a private fiefdom, judges, cops, mayors, all under his thumb. Lazia builds his empire through bootlegging, gambling, and the occasional murder. But his true weapon is influence. If someone gets arrested, a phone call from Pendergast makes it disappear. If a rival complains too loudly, they vanish into the Missouri River. For a time, Kansas City is untouchable, a place where corruption and politics dance hand in hand. Then comes Civella. Quiet, patient, calculating. Civella grows up on the city's north side, part of a generation of Italian immigrants trying to survive the Depression. By the 1940s, he's already known to the FBI. They describe him as a rising figure in the Kansas City underworld. Nick learns from the old bosses, but dreams bigger. He watches as Lazia is gunned down in 1934, shot dead on a downtown street in a hail of bullets that leaves blood pooling on the pavement. The message is clear. Power in Kansas City doesn't last forever. But Civella has something Lazia never did: restraint. He believes in longevity, not spectacle. By the 1950s, the Pendergast machine collapses under federal investigation. But the mob doesn't. It simply adapts. Civella fills the vacuum, turning the Kansas City outfit into one of the most disciplined families in America. The new boss doesn't need headlines. He prefers results. From his modest home on the city's east side, he controls bookmaking, extortion, labor racketeering, and the Teamsters Pension Fund, a goldmine for anyone connected to Las Vegas casinos. FBI files later reveal Civella's reach extends far beyond Kansas City. He meets with Chicago outfit members, Milwaukee's Frank Balistrieri, Cleveland's Angelo Leonardo, and other Midwest heavyweights. His name surfaces in Las Vegas, too, in casino skimming operations that quietly pull millions from the count rooms of the Stardust, the the Tropicana, and the Fremont. But back home, Kansas City still moves at Civela's pace. Steady, silent, profitable. The violence that once drew attention is replaced with a kind of order. Rivalries are kept in check. Territory is respected. Then, in the early 1970s, something new rises in the city's old riverfront, a district called River Quay. At first, it's a developer's dream, a stretch of historic warehouses turned into jazz clubs, restaurants, and art galleries. For locals, it's a chance to revive Kansas City's soul. But for the mob, it's something else entirely, an opportunity. The district sits on valuable land, and it's flooded with cash. Liquor licenses, parking, entertainment, all potential rackets. The outfit sees River Quay not as culture, but as territory waiting to be claimed. And soon, the piece Nick Civella built begins to crack. His nephew, Carl Cork Civella, and his hot-tempered lieutenant, Willie the Rat Camisano, see River Quay as their ticket to power. Younger, hungrier, more reckless than Nick, they don't understand the old man's caution. They want control now, and they willing to get it the old-fashioned way, with threats and fire. Local businessman Fred Bonadonna becomes an early target. He runs several bars and nightclubs in the Key and refuses to pay for protection. That decision will put his entire family in the crosshairs. FBI agents watching from a distance notice the shift. The old Kansas City code, quiet deals, no bodies in the street, is starting to fade. Nick Civella is aging. The men under him are restless. Money is tighter. Ambition is higher. And as River Quay grows brighter, the shadows behind it grow darker. For decades, Kansas City was built on deals. But now it's running on tension. The balance that held for 50 years is about to snap. And when it does, the city will burn. Chapter 2. The River Quay Dream. By the early 1970s, the River Quay district glows with possibility. Once a row of abandoned warehouses near the Missouri River, it now hums with laughter, jazz, and the promise of rebirth. For Kansas City, a town long stained by mob politics and corruption, River Quay feels different. Fresh, artistic, legitimate. At the center of this revival stands Fred Bonadonna. The son of a respected Italian-American family, Fred is young, ambitious, and idealistic. He envisions River Quay as a beacon of urban renewal, a place where creativity replaces crime, and where Kansas City can finally shed its mob reputation. Bonadonna opens several popular clubs and restaurants: Poor Freddy's, the Old Spaghetti Factory, and the Barrel House. They attract students, artists, and suburban visitors who flock to the district for its music and nightlife. For the first time in decades, downtown Kansas City feels alive again. But to others, that success smells like money, and money means opportunity. Across town, the Civella crime family is watching closely. Boss Nick Civella, the quiet patriarch who built an empire on discipline and loyalty, keeps his distance. He prefers politics and profits, not publicity. But his nephew Carl Cork Civella doesn't share his restraint. Carl sees River Quay as a goldmine, a cash-rich entertainment district sitting right in his backyard. He believes the mob should control it, from liquor distribution to parking. To him, Fred Bonadonna's independence isn't admirable. It's defiance. Standing with Carl is Willie, the Rat Camisano, one of the most feared enforcers in Kansas City. Camisano has a reputation for brutality. He doesn't bluff, and he doesn't forget an insult. His loyalty to the Sevelas is unquestioned, but his methods are pure intimidation. The two men begin leaning on River Quay business owners. They offer protection, suggest partnerships, and quietly spread the word that refusing them is bad for business. Fred Bonadonna refuses. He believes in what he built, a legitimate, thriving district free of mob control. When Camisano's men approach him, he turns them down flat. That's when the threats begin. One night, Bonadonna receives a message through a mutual acquaintance. "Fred," the man warns, "you're in over your head. These people aren't bluffing." Bonadonna doesn't flinch. He tells friends, "If I give in once, they'll own me forever." The tension builds quietly, but unmistakably. River Quay's business owners begin to take sides. Some pay up, hoping to stay safe. Others follow Bonadonna's lead and resist. But resistance in Kansas City has consequences. By 1975, the violence starts small. A few broken windows, threatening phone calls, then arson. One by one, bars and restaurants connected to Bonadonna's circle go up in flames. The fires are meant to send a message. River Quay belongs to the outfit. The local press begins to notice. A Kansas City Times article describes a series of mysterious fires in the River Quay area, though few dare to say the word mob. The city wants to believe the violence is random, vandalism, maybe insurance fraud, anything but a return to the old days. But the FBI knows better. Agents working under the newly formed Organized Crime Strike Force have been monitoring the Civella family for years. They've bugged phones, planted microphones in pizza parlors, and gathered testimony from informants. Now, River Quay has their attention. Bonadonna himself reaches out to federal investigators. He reports the threats, the fires, and the attempts to strong-arm his businesses. But the FBI moves cautiously. They know how deeply rooted the Civella family is in local politics. Evidence must be airtight, or it'll collapse in court. Meanwhile, inside the mob, divisions are deepening. Nick Civella, aging and cautious, warns his men not to draw heat. But Carl and Camisano are already in too deep. They see Bonadonna's defiance as an insult, a public challenge to their power. And in the world of organized crime, challenges can't go unanswered. In private conversations, Carl allegedly vows to take care of the Bonadonnas. By now, the River Quay dream is unraveling. Tourists stay away, businesses close. Fear replaces optimism. Bonadonna continues to speak out, a dangerous act of defiance in a city where silence is survival. Then, in 1976, the violence crosses a line. Late one night, an explosion tears through the quiet streets. A car parked near one of the Quay's clubs detonates with thunderous force. Flames engulf nearby buildings. It's the first in a string of bombings that will rock Kansas City. Firefighters rush in, but the message is already written in smoke. The outfit is at war with itself. FBI agents later trace the violence to a split between Nick Civella's old guard and the ambitious younger faction led by his nephew. Each wants control of River Quay, and neither will back down. The once glittering entertainment district becomes a battleground, and for Fred Bonadonna, the dream he built on hope and hard work is about to turn into a nightmare. The car bombs have only just begun. Chapter 3. The Split Within. By 1977, Kansas City's underworld is cracking from within. The River Quay War isn't just a turf dispute anymore. It is a symptom of something deeper. The Kansas City outfit, once united under Nick Civella's quiet command, is splintering into factions. The old rules are breaking. The ones who built the empire, the patient, methodical, invisible men, are losing control to the young and reckless. For decades, Nick Civella's word had been law. He ruled the outfit not with chaos, but with order. No headlines, no loose ends, no unnecessary bloodshed. His genius was restraint, understanding that the mob's greatest weapon wasn't fear, but control. But now, age and illness are eroding his authority. The FBI has his phones tapped, his movements are tracked, and within his own organization, his nephew Carl Cork. Civella begins acting like the new boss before the old one is even gone. Carl wants more money, more muscle, and more recognition. His methods are louder, dirtier, and far more public. The River Quay with its bars and cash flow becomes his stage. At his side is Willie the Rat Camisano, a man who thrives on intimidation. He's loyal to the Sevelas, but he's feared even more than he's trusted. Camisano has no patience for negotiation. His answer to defiance is always violence. Together, Carl and Willie's approach to power is pure aggression. They push out competitors, extort business owners, and set fires when words don't work. To them, Fred Bonadonna isn't just a problem, he's a test. If they can't crush one stubborn businessman, how can they claim control of Kansas City's most valuable district? Inside FBI offices downtown, investigators are starting to see the outlines of a civil war. The Bureau's organized crime strike force, led by prosecutors like Jim P. O'Brien and Gary Hart, is intercepting conversations that reveal tension inside the outfit. Agents listening to wiretaps hear mobsters arguing over River Quay profits and accusing each other of getting greedy. But greed isn't the only problem. Ego is. Nick Civella, still officially in charge, is furious about the attention River Quay is bringing. He knows publicity is poison. The FBI ASIs are already on Kansas City because of a much bigger secret: the mob ES hidden stake in Las Vegas casinos. For years, Kansas City has quietly funneled Teamsters' pension money into casino operations in Nevada, along with partners from Chicago, Milwaukee, and Cleveland. The straw man operation, as it's later called, is a gold mine. Money is skimmed directly from casino count rooms and split among mob families across the Midwest. Nick knows one thing: the feds are close, and the last thing he needs is his nephew lighting fires in his backyard while agents are listening to every word. But Carl doesn't listen. He sees River Quay as his proving ground, his chance to step out from his uncle's shadow. Camisano encourages him, whispering that the old man's time is over. They're the future. Meanwhile, Fred Bonadonna continues to resist. Despite warnings, despite arson, despite threats, he refuses to pay protection money. Instead, he takes his story to law enforcement. He becomes a key witness for the FBI, describing how mobsters have tried to muscle into his clubs. Bonadonna's defiance infuriates the outfit. Inside the Civella faction, discussions turn deadly. Someone suggests sending a message. In early 1978, a black sedan is spotted cruising near Bonadonna's businesses. Windows tinted, plates swapped. Locals start whispering that something big is coming. On the night of April 27, 1978, the war claims its most brutal victim. A car bomb detonates outside the home of Carl Bonadonna, Fred's father. The explosion rips through the quiet residential street, blowing out windows and lighting the night sky orange. Carl, a respected grocer with no mob ties, is killed instantly. The message couldn't be clearer: defy the outfit, and your family pays. Fred Bonadonna identifies the killers, Willie Camisano and his crew, and goes public with his accusations. He testifies before a grand jury, naming names, pointing fingers. His courage draws national attention, but also seals his fate. Within days, the remaining River Quay businesses shutter. The entertainment district that was supposed to save Kansas City, OS downtown, is reduced to ashes and fear. Inside FBI headquarters, agents know they've finally got enough, not just for arson or extortion, but for something bigger. They link the River Quay bombings to the larger straw man investigation, connecting local violence to interstate racketeering. But while the Bureau gathers evidence, the mob tears itself apart. Old loyalties disintegrate. Nick Civella's brother, Carl "Cork" Civella, becomes increasingly paranoid, convinced someone inside the outfit is feeding information to the FBI. Camisano's enforcers stop trusting each other. Meetings grow tense. Conversations are whispered in code. And every car ignition becomes a moment of fear. Kansas City's criminal empire, built on decades of control and silence, is devouring itself. The River Quay dream is gone. The Civella legacy is bleeding out, and the FBI's microphones are still recording. The next time those recordings make headlines, they'll expose not just the men behind the bombings, but the entire structure of mob control in America's heartland. Chapter 4. Fire in the Quay, Kansas City, summer of 1978. The smell of smoke still lingers in the air. The River Quay, once a thriving nightlife hub, now looks like a war zone. Charred beams jut out of collapsed buildings. The sound of police sirens echo nightly, and locals whisper about who's next. The city's newspapers call it urban decay. The FBI calls it something else: evidence. Agents are now convinced that the firebombings, shootings, and extortion across the Quay aren't isolated crimes. They were coordinated attacks ordered by the Kansas City outfit. For decades, the outfit had been invisible. Its leaders controlled labor unions, casinos, and politicians, all without gunfire or headlines. But now, the mob's worst secret is out in the open. The family is fighting itself, and Kansas City is burning because of it. In FBI surveillance rooms, agents listen to the chaos unfold in real time. The wiretaps they placed on Nick Civella ES phone, as part of a broader investigation into Las Vegas casino skimming, begin picking up conversations about trouble in the Key. On one tape, mobsters talk about a situation that got out of hand. Another mentions that kid Bonadonna running his mouth again. Every conversation confirms what the Bureau already suspects. The Kansas City mob has declared war on one of its own citizens. Inside the outfit, pressure is mounting. The bomb that killed Carl Bonadonna wasn't he supposed to bring attention, it was supposed to bring silence. But it did the opposite. The murder shocked the community, triggered massive police raids, and drew the FBI's full attention to River Quay. Fred Bonadonna's testimony becomes a turning point. He sits down with federal agents and tells them everything: the protection rackets, the threats, the firebombings, and who ordered them. His words are detailed, specific, and damning. Fred names Willie the Rat Camisano, Carl Civella, and other key figures. He describes meetings in dimly lit bars where mobsters demanded cuts of business profits and threats that accidents happen to people who don't cooperate. The FBI takes his claims seriously. For the first time, the Bureau starts linking Kansas City's local violence to its national network. The names that surface in Kansas City are the same ones appearing in investigations in Chicago, Cleveland, and Milwaukee, all tied to Las Vegas. But while the FBI builds its case, the outfit's paranoia explodes. Nick Civella, sick and aging, hears rumors that someone close to him is talking. Every time he picks up the phone, he worries it's tapped. Every knock on the door feels like the FBI. His inner circle grows smaller. Even his nephew Carl is beginning to act independently, as if the old man's word no longer matters. Willie Camisano, meanwhile, doubles down. He orders more firebombings to scare any remaining River Quay business owners into submission. Between 1977 and 1978, over a dozen buildings go up in flames. Most are small bars and restaurants that refuse to pay street tax. Each fire lights up the night sky, a public warning that the outfit is still in control. But those fires also light up FBI files. In one operation, federal agents follow suspected arsonists back to a Kansas City garage used by Camisano's crew. Inside, they find empty gasoline cans, stolen license plates, and maps of River Quay businesses marked in red. It is enough to convince federal prosecutors that this isn't a turf feud, it is organized terrorism. The Bureau moves fast. They launch a joint task force with local police and prosecutors, collecting phone records, eyewitness statements, and surveillance logs. It's called Operation Strawman 2. The focus isn't just the River Quay anymore. It asks the entire Kansas City outfit. The agents now believe the same men bombing local bars are also skimming millions from Las Vegas casinos. But inside the mob, a different kind of fire burns, one of betrayal and revenge. Camisano's men suspect that Bonadonna's cooperation means indictments are coming. They start looking for rats inside their own ranks. Informants disappear. Associates vanish overnight. By late 1978, Kansas City is in a full-blown mob war, one quieter than Chicago S or New York S, but just as lethal. Car bombs replace warnings. Houses go up in flames. And in the background, the FBI listens to every panic-stricken call, every coded threat, every whispered name. One night, a recorded conversation between Nick Civella and his brother Carl gives agents what they've been waiting for. Nick warns Carl to stay away from the Key and keep your mouth shut. To the FBI, it asks confirmation that the boss knows exactly who is responsible for the bombings and is now trying to contain the damage. But it's too late. The Bureau raids multiple locations tied to the outfit. They seize ledgers, phone logs, and cash. They arrest low-level arsonists, bookies, and collectors. Each one is offered a deal: talk or face federal time. And slowly, the truth begins to surface. The River Quay wasn't just a turf war. It was a reflection of everything that was collapsing inside the Kansas City Mafia. The old code of silence, the respect for leadership, the belief that violence stayed in the shadows. By trying to prove their dominance, Carl Civella and Willie Camisano exposed the entire organization. When Fred Bonadonna walks into federal court to testify, the room is silent. He's not just talking about arson or extortion anymore. He's describing the inner workings of a criminal empire that reaches from Missouri to Nevada. His testimony helped set off one of the largest organized crime investigations in Midwestern history. And as the indictments begin to fall, the FBI knows that Kansas City's mob war, once hidden in alleyways and riverfront bars, is about to make national headlines. The fire in the Key has burned everything: the businesses, the alliances, and the illusion of control. But something far more explosive is coming. Because as the FBI connects River Quay to the casino Skimming in Las Vegas, they uncover recordings so incriminating, they'll not only take down the Kansas City mob, they'll expose the entire American Mafia's secret network. Chapter 5. The Wire That Changed Everything. By 1979, the FBI's investigation into Kansas City had shifted from local arson and extortion to something much larger. The River Quay bombings had drawn attention, but the Bureau now suspected a deeper, nationwide connection: money moving from casinos in Las Vegas to organized crime families across the Midwest. Nick Civella, the aging Kansas City boss, had long maintained a low profile. He rarely drew attention to himself, preferring to let lieutenants handle the day-to-day operations while he quietly coordinated profits from gambling, loan sharking, and union manipulation. But the FBI had learned that Civella was far more than a local figure. Through the Teamsters Pension Fund and carefully orchestrated partnerships, he had been part of a sophisticated skimming operation in Las Vegas casinos. Millions of dollars, funneled quietly, were enriching Kansas City, Chicago, Milwaukee, and Cleveland mob families simultaneously. Wiretaps became the Bureau's most effective tool. In a small office in downtown Kansas City, agents listened intently as conversations between Civella and his associates revealed the inner workings of the outfit. One call, later presented in federal court, captured Civella giving instructions about casino profits. His tone was calm, almost mundane, but the content was explosive. "Make sure the take is clean. Don't leave paper trails. Nobody can know how much moves through Kansas City." To the FBI, this was a smoking gun. It tied local mob operations directly to the national syndicate's largest revenue streams. Every penny skimmed from Vegas was traced back to men like Carl Civella and Willie Camisano, men who were simultaneously terrorizing River Quay. The Bureau's strategy was simple: build airtight cases linking violent crimes in Kansas City to the larger criminal enterprise. The same mobsters responsible for arson, bombings, and extortion were now caught on tape discussing multi-million-dollar casino skims. Fred Bonadonna's cooperation had already provided crucial context, but the wiretaps revealed the depth of Civella's operations and the audacity. Conversations between Civella, his brothers, and top lieutenants detailed logistics for moving cash, threats against non-compliant business owners, and instructions for violent enforcement of debts. "If anyone gives trouble in the Key, take care of it quietly," one lieutenant said. "Burn it down. Make sure they know we're in charge." The wire recordings left no doubt. The Kansas City mob was conducting a full-scale civil war in its own backyard, while simultaneously profiting from interstate criminal schemes. The Bureau coordinated with federal prosecutors in Kansas City, Las Vegas, and Washington, D.C., piecing together a map of organized crime that spanned states. Surveillance teams were dispatched to track suspected couriers moving money from the casinos back to the Midwest. The wire also revealed tension within the outfit itself. Civella was clearly frustrated with his younger faction. In one conversation, he scolded Carl. "Don't make the Key your playground. Keep it quiet, or we all pay the price." But Carl and Camisano ignored the warning. Violence continued to escalate, and the FBI had evidence that could not only take down the violent enforcers, but also implicate Civella himself in a national crime network. Every firebomb, every threatening phone call, every broken window in River Quay became part of a larger picture. The Kansas City Civil War was no longer isolated. It was connected to an organized scheme generating millions. By mid-1979, the FBI's case had evolved from local protection rackets to interstate racketeering under the RICO Act. It was one of the first major uses of RICO in the Midwest. Prosecutors could now charge Civella and his lieutenants for both the River Quay violence and their casino skimming operations. The recordings were damning. Conversations captured orders for hits, details of financial transfers, and evidence of intimidation of witnesses, including Fred Bonadonna. Every directive that Carl and Camisano had issued in River Quay was matched by instructions on how to skim casino profits without detection. For agents, the realization was clear. The mob's local chaos had exposed a national criminal empire. River Quay was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled decades of secrecy. As the FBI prepared indictments, tension inside the outfit reached a breaking point. Carl and Camisano's reckless approach had brought the full force of federal law down on the Kansas City mob. Nick Civella, who had spent decades cultivating power quietly, watched as his family's empire began to collapse from within. River Quay, once a symbol of ambition and profit, had become the battleground that triggered the outfit's exposure. And the evidence collected on the wire, the recorded conversations, the financial trail, the detailed orders for violence, ensured that there would be no safe harbor for anyone involved. The Kansas City mob, which had long thrived in the shadows, could no longer hide. And when the indictments were finally unsealed, the full scale of the Civil War, and its connection to Las Vegas, would shock not just the city, but the nation. The wire had changed everything. The stage was set for arrests, trials, and the collapse of the Civella dynasty. Chapter 6. The Fall of the Sevelas. By 1980, the Kansas City outfit teeters on the edge of collapse. The River Quay bombings, once isolated acts of intimidation, have escalated into a full-blown civil war. At the same time, the FBI's strawman investigation, connecting the mob to Vegas skimming, is closing in. The Sevelas, who once ruled Kansas City with quiet authority, are now fighting on multiple fronts: internal betrayal, federal scrutiny, and public outrage. The turning point comes with the death of Carl Bonadonna, the father of Fred Bonadonna. On April 27, 1978, a car bomb detonates outside his modest North Kansas City home. The explosion kills him instantly, leaving Fred and his family shattered. It's a message meant to intimidate, but instead it galvanizes law enforcement. Fred becomes the linchpin in the FBI's case, providing detailed testimony about the Cevella's intimidation tactics, the firebombings, and the mob's attempts to control River Quay. The FBI now has a blueprint of the outfit's operations. Wiretaps reveal Nick Civella coordinating casino skimming operations, while younger lieutenants like Carl Civella and Willie the Rat Camisano carry out violent enforcement in River Quay. Surveillance teams follow money transfers from Las Vegas casinos to Kansas City, and informants corroborate Bonadonna's claims. The federal case is methodical. Prosecutors begin issuing subpoenas for key associates, seizing financial records, and preparing indictments under the RICO Act. The inclusion of the car bombings, arson, and extortion demonstrates that the Kansas City outfit is engaged in an enterprise that spans state lines, exactly the kind of organized crime the law was designed to target. Within the mob, paranoia spreads like wildfire. Carl Civella accuses underlings of talking to law enforcement. Willie Camisano grows increasingly violent, lashing out against anyone perceived as disloyal. Even the older Civella faction, which preferred quiet control, can no longer keep the younger generation in check. The River Quay district itself becomes a symbol of the mob's unraveling. Buildings once thriving with jazz and nightlife remain charred and abandoned. Locals avoid the streets at night, and businesses that survive the bombings either pay off protection rackets or close permanently. What was once a jewel of urban renewal is now a war-torn battlefield, evidence of the chaos inside the Kansas City outfit. Federal arrests begin in 1981. Low-level enforcers are taken into custody first, followed by higher-ranking lieutenants. In court, Fred Bonadonna provides vivid testimony about the mob's violent tactics and the structure of its organization. His account, combined with FBI surveillance, convinces juries that the Cevellas orchestrated both local violence and interstate skimming operations. Nick Civella, the once untouchable patriarch, is indicted. The charges are severe: racketeering, extortion, conspiracy, and involvement in violent crimes. Carl Civella and Willie Camisano face similar charges. The indictments are historic, marking one of the first major applications of RICO to a Midwestern crime family. Even within prison walls, the fallout continues. Rival factions jockey for control. Some members attempt to maintain influence from behind bars, but the combination of federal pressure and internal distrust renders these efforts ineffective. By 1983, the Civella dynasty is effectively broken. Nick Civella dies in prison before fully serving his sentence, leaving the family in disarray. Carl Civella faces decades behind bars, and Willie Camisano is forced into hiding to escape further federal attention. River Quay, scarred physically and psychologically, remains a reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition. The area slowly rebuilds, but the shadow of the Kansas City Civil War lingers in the city's memory. The FBI, having successfully linked local violence to national racketeering, demonstrates the effectiveness of combining wiretaps, informants, and cooperative witnesses. The downfall of the Sevelas not only restores a measure of law and order in Kansas City, but also sends a chilling message to organized crime families across the Midwest. Internal greed and violence can be as deadly as federal indictments. The fall of the Sevelas closes one chapter in Kansas City's criminal history, but it also exposes the vulnerabilities of mob families nationwide. They are powerful, yes, but no empire built on fear and secrecy is impervious. For Kansas City, the River Quay War is over. For the Sevelas, it is the end of their reign. And for the FBI, it is proof that even the most secretive and violent criminal operations can be brought to justice with patience, precision, and evidence. Chapter 7. Aftermath of an Empire. By the mid-1980s, the smoke over River Quay has finally cleared, but the scars remain. What was once Kansas City's proud entertainment district has become a symbol of greed, betrayal, and the slow death of the mob's old-world power. The Civella empire is gone. Its leaders are dead, imprisoned, or in hiding. The FBI's strawman investigation has laid bare the mob's intricate connections to Las Vegas, and Kansas City's underworld, once seen as untouchable, is now crippled. For decades, Nick Civella ruled from the shadows. His power came not from publicity but from precision, the quiet manipulation of unions, casinos, and political connections. When he died behind bars in 1983, the city didn't celebrate. It exhaled. A long, violent chapter had finally closed. But the fall of the Sevelas didn't erase the culture they left behind. Their influence had seeped into the foundations of Kansas City life: politics, construction, nightlife, even sports betting. In the aftermath, investigators uncovered decades of corruption linked to local officials and businessmen who had turned a blind eye or quietly profited from mob dealings. Fred Bonadonna, once a small-time businessman targeted by the outfit, becomes both a survivor and a symbol. His testimony had helped destroy one of America's most entrenched crime families, but it came at a cost. He lived under constant threat, his businesses ruined, his father murdered. To him, victory felt hollow. The River Quay district, meanwhile, lay dormant for years. Burned-out buildings stood as reminders of a time when ambition and violence had collided in the heart of Kansas City. Eventually, redevelopment projects began to revive the area under a new name: the City Market District. Families returned. Restaurants reopened. But locals never forgot what had happened there. Beneath the bright signs and music, the ghosts of the past still lingered. Across the country, the collapse of the Kansas City mob sent shockwaves through organized crime. The FBI's success inspired new strategies in dismantling other regional families. The strawman case became a blueprint for how federal agencies could use financial records and wiretaps to trace the flow of illegal money. What began with one small entertainment district had helped expose a national criminal network. For law enforcement, the Kansas City case represented more than just another mob bust. It was the turning point in the fight against organized crime. The Bureau learned that patience and precision could dismantle even the most secretive empires. Instead of focusing on street-level crimes, agents began following money, tapping phones, and infiltrating unions. By the late 1980s, the once dominant Civella family had been replaced by smaller, fractured groups. Some attempted to rebuild under new leadership, but the golden era of the Kansas City outfit was gone forever. Without Nick's discipline or Carl's fear-driven authority, the structure collapsed into petty disputes and half-hearted rackets. In Las Vegas, casino operations grew cleaner as federal oversight increased. The strawman prosecutions led to the removal of mob influence from several casinos, and legitimate corporations began taking control. The days of quiet skimming and handshake deals were over. The River Quay War, once dismissed as a local feud, had in truth been the match that ignited the end of an era. It showed the world that organized crime wasn't invincible. It showed that even the most powerful families could destroy themselves from the inside. In later interviews, former FBI agents described how close the Kansas City mob had come to surviving. If not for the greed that fueled the River Quay conflict, if not for the arrogance of men like Carl Civella and Willie Camisano, the outfit might have stayed hidden for another decade. But in the end, the lesson was simple. Violence brings attention. Attention brings investigation. And investigation brings ruin. By the 1990s, Kansas City had changed. New generations no longer whispered the Sevella name with fear. The River Quay bombings became a grim local legend, a cautionary tale told in true crime documentaries and police academies alike. Fred Bonadonna eventually left the city that had taken so much from him. In interviews years later, he reflected not with triumph, but with exhaustion. "You never really win against them," he said quietly. "You just survive." The River Quay, reborn as City Market, stands today as a place of life, not death. The music returned. The lights came back. Families walk where once car bombs exploded. But beneath the pavement lies a story, one of power, greed, loyalty, and loss. And while the Kansas City mob's empire has long since turned to dust, the echoes of that war still hum faintly through the city's veins, a reminder of when organized crime brought a small Midwestern town to its knees, and how a handful of wiretaps, witnesses, and courage finally brought it to an end. Chapter 8. The Legacy of River Quay. By the 1990s, the River Quay conflict had faded from daily headlines, but its imprint on Kansas City remained indelible. The district itself, once a battleground of firebombs and intimidation, had been rebuilt and rebranded as the City Market District. Tourists walked its streets, families shopped in its stalls, and jazz returned to echo through the warehouses. Yet, beneath the revitalized facades, lingered the shadows of the Civella War, a story of ambition, violence, and the eventual collapse of a criminal empire. The Civella family, once untouchable, had been dismantled by a combination of internal betrayal and federal intervention. The FBI's wiretaps and surveillance, combined with Fred Bonadonna's brave testimony, exposed the full scope of Kansas City's organized crime network. The strawman investigation, linking local violence to casino skimming operations in Las Vegas, became a blueprint for tackling the mafia across the Midwest. For the residents of Kansas City, the aftermath was bittersweet. Some mourned the loss of old connections that had quietly kept the city's underworld in check. Others celebrated the restoration of law and order. Business owners who survived the River Quay bombing slowly rebuilt, learning hard lessons about survival in a city once ruled by fear. Law enforcement, emboldened by their success, expanded their focus beyond Kansas City. The Civella indictments demonstrated that even mid-sized cities could harbor complex criminal enterprises, and that federal oversight, when combined with careful intelligence gathering, could dismantle them. The era of silent, invisible mob control was coming to an end. In Las Vegas, casinos were reshaped under stricter regulations. Skimming operations that had funneled millions into Midwest crime families were curtailed. Corporations, rather than mob figures, controlled major gaming establishments. The ripple effect of Kansas City's investigations had national implications, signaling to other crime families that unchecked violence and greed could invite federal collapse. Within the mob itself, the River Quay War became a cautionary tale. Younger enforcers, who had once thrived on public intimidation and bold acts of aggression, learned that overreach could destroy entire families. Older bosses, who had maintained control through discipline and discretion, realized that without careful oversight, empires could crumble from within. Fred Bonadonna's life story, intertwined with the rise and fall of the Sevelas, became emblematic of resilience. Despite losing family, livelihood, and peace, he survived to tell the story. His testimony, once feared to draw retaliation, ultimately helped bring justice to a city long ruled by shadows. The River Quay legacy extends beyond law enforcement. It reshaped Kansas City's identity. What had once been a hub of crime and corruption transformed into a symbol of urban renewal and vigilance. City planners, historians, and journalists use the River Quay story as a case study in the destructive power of organized crime and the importance of civic oversight, community courage, and investigative persistence. For the nation, the Kansas City mob war underscored a broader truth. Even the most disciplined, secretive criminal organizations are vulnerable when ambition, violence, and greed collide. The Sevelas, once symbols of dominance, became examples of downfall, illustrating that no empire, however hidden or powerful, is invincible. Today, the River Quay streets hum with commerce and culture. Jazz and food festivals fill the warehouses where fires once roared. The car bombs are gone, the smoke dissipated, and the fear lifted. Yet the story of the Civella Civil War remains etched into Kansas City's memory, a reminder that history is written not just in victory and profit, but in violence, courage, and the tireless pursuit of justice. The Kansas City mob may have ruled quietly for decades, but the River Quay War changed everything. It illuminated the risks of unchecked ambition, revealed the vulnerabilities of even the most powerful crime families, and showed how ordinary people, like Fred Bonadonna, could tip the balance of history. As the city moved forward, one lesson endured. Even in the heart of America, no criminal empire is untouchable, and no street, however beautiful, is immune to the shadows of power.